Welcome to Season 5 of the Long-Winded One podcast. Listen as we showcase original work from top Royal Road authors read by professional voice actors. Hear interviews from your favourite lit RPG and game lit authors. Lastly, listen as the Long-Winded One tries his hand at his first ever lit RPG novel, The Four Treasures.
Excerpt of the Book of Avalon Eternal, written by Austin Keats, read by John Kennard. The knight Gawain of the Round Table, commander of the armies of Camelot, stands amid the chaos of battle. Above him is the magnificent palace built around the ruins of a Roman villa, with its high stone walls reaching into the sky. Gawain seeks any sign of his uncle, who raised him from childhood, and was a father to him, when his own father did nothing to deserve the name. He seeks any sign at all of Arthur. In the distance, Gawain sees the great knight of the Round Table named Owain, kneeling over his uncle. He sprints toward them and finds Arthur leaning back on his elbow, looking down to the grievous wound on his right side. Mordred, Arthur's son and Gawain's half-brother, lies on the ground a few feet away, blood pouring from a terrible wound in his chest given by Excalibur. Owain moves from Arthur to stand over Mordred. He places his boot on Mordred's throat, and Gawain hears a sound like a large branch breaking in a storm. "He was already dead," Owain says in a deep, expressionless voice. Mordred, the son who rebelled against his father, who tried and failed to take his father's throne, and who, with his final act, wounded his father gravely and mortally. He will now be judged by the gods for his many crimes and sins. Owain returns to Arthur, whose face is pallid. His brown and silver hair frames his head like a diadem. Excalibur lies in the mud next to him, its blade soaked with Mordred's blood. Around them is the cacophony of clanging metal, the sharp, biting scent of blood, the shrieks of dying men like pigs in terror at the final abattoir. "My lord, let me see your wound," Owain says to Arthur. The huge man is surprisingly soft of voice and touch. Arthur does not reply, falling back onto the ground as his elbow gives way. "We need a healer, right now," Gawain says urgently. Owain shakes his head and says simply, "There are none." Gawain raises his head to search for the bright yellow that marks the druid healer's battle attire. Because, without a healer, he knows that Arthur will not leave this field alive. Then Lionel, another knight of the Round Table, breaks through the melee. His mane of blonde hair is soaked with the blood of those who have challenged him today. Arthur coughs again, deep and racking, and Owain holds him up so that he does not choke. Arthur spits out a mouthful of black blood that drips down his beard and sprays dark droplets across Owain's face. "Galahad holds the bridge, and Sagramor holds the line in front!" Lionel yells against the tumult around them. Gawain squints toward the bridge. In the misty spring morning he sees a flicker of white. Galahad, brave and true. At least 20 men are behind Galahad on the bridge, and before them are Sagramor and his formidable band, the hammer to the anvil. "Where are the healers?" Lionel says. "Gone. You must find the Lady Morgan. If you can find Nimue, bring her too. Both of you, hurry," says Owain. Gawain and Lionel set off toward the witches' camp, where Morgan and Nimue are likely to be. But suddenly 2 Saxons emerge from the throng of dying men, swords in hand. It is only by luck that Gawain fends off the first blow from the one that attacks him. He sees the other Saxon land a blow on Lionel's ribs, but his boiled leather armour renders it harmless. Gawain refocuses his attention on the Saxon before him, who has now regained his balance and is girding for another attack. The Saxon rushes forward, but Gawain parries the first swing and follows with a push that causes the Saxon to slip in the mud. The Saxon realizes that he cannot recover. His knee is twisted and his leg is broken. Gawain raises his sword high above his head and brings the blade down into the centre of the Saxon's skull, which parts easily under the weight of his blow. He looks to his right at Lionel, who is still in close combat with his attacker. To his surprise, the other man is not a Saxon after all. He's British, but of which tribe Gawain cannot say. Lionel's poise is broken by a sharp blow in the centre of his chest from the Briton's mailed fist. Lionel staggers backwards before steadying himself with the point of his sword in the mud. But then Lionel cannot wrench the sword free. The Briton, seeing an opening, rushes forward to deliver a fatal blow. The Briton raises his sword, but he too slips in the mud. His blow falls off the mark, and Lionel blocks it with his greaves. Regaining his balance, the Briton approaches Lionel once more and kicks him squarely in the chest, sending him sprawling backwards. The Briton is suddenly wrapped in a faint silver thread, ethereal and translucent, lacing from his torso to his waist, pinning his arms to his sides. From his feet to his groin a scarlet thread wraps and pulls so tightly that his legs are severed above the knees. He falls limply into the mud and does not move again. And behind the Briton, Gawain sees two figures approaching, moving unharmed through the bitter combat between Arthur's army and the forces of Mordred. The first figure is draped in crimson with leather boots and gold belt, her silver hair untied upon her head. Lady Morgan, she of ruthless vigour and a mind of cold iron, elder sister to Arthur. Crimson threads circle her fingers like rings, and Gawain knows it was the power of those threads that leapt forth to take the legs of the Briton. Lady Morgan, given the title of Fay, who changed her name and her fate simultaneously when she wedded her future to the power of the Fay, they who beat their shining opal wings through the realms of chaos between worlds and outside of the silver thread. The second figure is Nimue, she who is called the Great Witch, in her white shift, sheer, featureless, and somehow unstained. She is barefooted and does not notice the mud and blood that coat her feet and squeeze between her toes. Her hair hangs lank and damp with sweat, onyx black, and framing a gently triangular face paler than the southern cliffs that meet the sea. Her brown eyes glow with a soft light that is incongruous with the terrible force she has used today in this battle. And at her fingertips hang the remnant of the silver threads that wrapped the Briton's chest so tightly. Approaching Gawain now through the chaos, Nimue seems different. She seems transformed. For the first time to him, she is beautiful. Many years ago, when Nimue came into her power while under the guidance of Merlin, she was captured by an ancient magic that held her relentlessly until she bent to its will, and the magic filled her, and she knew then that it would be her destiny. The acceptance of the magic's power allowed it to flow into her such that she captured it in turn, and commanded it utterly. And she was changed in her mind and spirit into something else that cannot be described in words. Nimue, who emerged from the lake, and is the lady of all lakes in dark groves, shimmering with light of Fey and small gods, where the veil between worlds grows weak and thin. She who tore the sword from the grasp of the demon that had wielded it across unspeakable worlds through past ages ancient and unknowable, until the demon met the great witch against whom it would never pass or prevail. Traversing darkness and chaos, Nimue reached Avalon, through which all things pass, and from which all things are made. Avalon, from which the silver thread weaves together, forming all things through all ages, and extending forever, and in every direction of eternity. By the force of her bright magic given by the gods, and by the blessing of the Horned One who is always both ancient and newly born, Nimue came again into this world, through the gate that opens into the bottom of the lake. She rose from the depths, soaked in its holy water, and both she and the sword were cleansed of the filth of the world from which she brought it. The tip of the sword broke the lake's surface first, and was held up by Nimue's white arm, shining like marble as the moonlight gleamed on the pristine edge of the blade. She emerged from the lake, and stood on its shore, unclothed, and born anew with the holy water streaming down her body to wet the soft grass under her feet. And crossed against her breast was the sword that has many names, but in this world is called Caledfug, and was named again by Merlin as Excalibur. And so it is Morgan, beloved of the Fae, and Nimue, known and feared throughout many worlds as the greatest of witches, who move through the chaos untouched. Their full magic is unveiled, and it weaves together around them in crimson and silver. They stride inexorably toward the king to save him. For in the dim half-light of his fading awareness, Arthur feels the strangely gentle fingers of death pulling at the hem of his garment. This has been an excerpt from Chapter 1 of the Book of Avalon Eternal, written by Austin Keats, read by John Kennard, produced for Season 5 of the Long-Winded One podcast. The author and/or any present or future publishing company retains all of the rights for the associated work. This work was read by permission of the author. Hello, I'm John Kennard, and I'm a voice actor based in London. When I'm not reading excellent books like this one, I can be found in various audio drama podcasts which you can find links to at johnkennard.co.uk. I also work in corporate and commercial fields. You can follow me on Twitter as JK__VA, on Blue Sky as JK-VA, and Instagram as JohnKennardVA. Thank you for listening. Gawain and Lionel set off toward the witches' camp, where Morgan and
Thank you for joining us down this Lit RPG deep dive. Please consider giving us a review on Apple Podcasts and visit us over at longwinded.one, where you can see past episodes and find all of our socials, even our new Discord server. We hope you enjoy.